Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So we are going to be continuing our discussion about Dead Like Me. So we are on season 1 episode 13. This episode is titled Vacation. So this one is an interesting episode because we have two parallel stories happening of a vacation episode. So the last family is going on vacation. They're going up north a little bit and they're gonna go out into the wilderness, they're gonna fish, they're gonna be at the lake, it's gonna be great. Meanwhile, the Reapers are getting a little bit of a vacation as well because the Gravelings have decided to take the day off. Rube mentions that this only happens every couple of years. It's the way the stars align. There's not really any method to the madness, but it's happening. So they don't have to collect anybody's souls. That does mean that they still have to work though. In flashbacks, we see the last family traveling up and going to the same destination with little George and baby Reggie. And in these flashbacks, there's this really interesting dissonance because the last family is happy, they're enjoying life, they're connected together, and then in the present we see that Joy and Clancy's relationship is so strained and so broken, and there's this really strong divide of where this family used to be and where they're at now. And it's very clear that George was the breaking point, potentially, from what we saw on Sunday morning, because in the present time, Clancy is a pill. And yeah, Joy's not very nice either, but it kind of seems like Clancy started taking out all of his frustration about George not loving him and not being connected with him anymore, and he took all that out on the rest of his family. And maybe it was his own insecurity about being a father that's what caused him to start lashing out, which caused Joy to start acting the way that she did. And now it's clearly over. They just haven't said the words "we're done." This is also the very first episode where we start seeing that the phone is just ringing off the hook at the last house with no one answering on the other end. So when the last family picks up, there's nobody there. And it calls into question, is this Georgia calling? Because there's a point where she walks away from the group and she goes into the bathroom. It's possible that she called the house. And it also maybe raises, is this Charlotte? Because when Clancy finally picks up the phone, somebody is at the other end. And we see that George still is breaking into the house. She's still taking stuff and just kind of spying on her family. When she finds out that they have the day off, she really wants to try to get away. And even before that, she wanted to try to follow her family to their vacation destination because she missed it a lot. And the truth is that she misses her family really deeply and she wants to be with them, or at least spy on them and see how they're doing. We saw in the previous episode that George just has a really hard time letting go of them, and she just wants to make sure that they're okay. The Reapers still have to work. They have a bunch of filing that they have to do, which is ironic because George just left her filing job and now she's got to file all over again and be a temp. And Rube mentions that they are the last witnesses of these people, and he admits that he gets more than just the time and place of where the person's gonna die. He also gets their last thought, and that's how they need to file everything, is by the person's last thought. And this raises up some questions for Daisy. She starts having this existential crisis, and it piggybacks off of the storyline from the last episode where Daisy is sad about something. And in this episode, she talks about how it's sad that these people don't have more thoughts, that there's not more words, that they all regret things. They're sad about things they didn't do, and how you just move from one place in life to the next. And she even mentions that the magic of creation turns out to just be a 9-to-5 grind. And she's having this whole crisis. She collects herself and goes back to work. And it's interesting because we are peeling back layers into Daisy. And the episode kind of culminates with Mason finding her paperwork, which is interesting that they had her paperwork on the West Coast when Daisy died in Georgia, why they would have her paperwork. But also we get to see the date and time of Daisy's death, which corresponds with Gone with the Wind, but the location of her death is a little interesting because very few scenes were actually filmed in Georgia, and Daisy specifically died in Marietta, Georgia. So it does call into question a little bit if Daisy was telling the truth about the circumstance of her death. Maybe in this universe, Gone with the Wind was fully filmed in Georgia, and maybe that's why they started filming in LA. There's questions that I have about Daisy's true death and what she was actually doing, and if some of her stories about blowing the rich and famous are all true. Which Mason also asks about her type. He wants to know what she's into and why she's not into him. And there's clearly something that's brewing between them. There's this romance that's bubbling up. And Mason has always had feelings for Daisy, but he has feelings for any girl with a heartbeat. So he clearly likes her. Daisy has always feigned that she doesn't like him, even though there's been points where she's kind of come off as jealous, like when Mason had a crush on Charlotte. Daisy tried to sabotage it somehow and seemed really against the idea of him dating a living person, and she teased him. And in this episode, she's a little bit flirtatious back, so it's interesting because something is definitely happening there. The crew ends up going to work at Happy Time to go do all their filing and do everything on the computers, and they run into Crystal, who helps them out, and we're kind of peeling a few more layers back on Crystal. She shows a great amount of empathy towards George and really seems to like and care and miss her. It's been some time now since George has been away from Happy Time, so it's very clear that Crystal cares about her and wants to help her out. So it's nice to see Crystal not being so weird and just sitting behind a desk just staring at everybody. So on to my favorite quote from this episode. There is a point at the very beginning where Georgia asks the group if they've ever felt good and bad about something, and Daisy says, "I once had sex with a pilot of a 747 in flight. The sex was great, but I was sure we were going to die." I think almost all of my favorite quotes from each episode are Daisy quotes because she's so iconic and her writing is so good. So she again has made my favorite quote list. So thank you so much for watching this episode, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.